For thousands of years, man and dog have worked together in perfect harmony for the greater good of both kinds. But what about working together for evil? Today, we're going to be taking our newly acquired best friend on a wild adventure. Starting in Van Horn, we're going to blaze a path of crime and despair directly across the entire map. Our goal is to make it to the Stilt Shack all the way on the other side. The only rule I set for this challenge is that our dog cannot die. If he dies at any point during our journey, we must start over from the beginning. For this video, we're going to be using the Dog Companion mod. The Companion mod allows Arthur to bond with any dog in the game. Once bonded, the newly adopted dog will follow Arthur everywhere he goes and will even fight alongside him. Among other things, the dog can attack on command and, when needed, hunt wild animals. So with an awesome new canine buddy to hang out with, it's time to see if dogs really are man's best friend. All of this craziness started when I was running around Saint Denis looking to cause some chaos, and I happened to come across the most depressed dog that I've ever seen. He looked bored, like he could use a kick-ass new adventure in his life. So I decided to bestow it upon myself to try and take this canine on the most exciting, crime-riddled journey of all time. After we got acquainted, I faced the very difficult challenge of naming my newly acquired best friend. I decided that it was best to consult my most trusted advisors for help on this important matter. So after careful consideration, I finally decided on the perfect name.
That's it, boy.
I then took Ciggy to the one place in the game where I knew none of these pesky lawmen would bother us. After arriving in Van Horn, we got into the craziest shootout that I've ever been in and got destroyed by the most weapon-savvy alcoholics that I've ever seen.
There you are, Lenny.
This is starting off just wonderful. I came to on the docks of Van Horn and promptly antagonized two men just minding their business.
Ain't you tough?
And then ordered Ciggy to attack. Okay, so we might have a few things to work on. But without hesitating, I sprung into action to keep the men from shooting Ciggy on the first day of his adventure. I ran to the shore to make sure he got back safely. A little while later, I heard a woman scream in the distance.
Stop! You're gonna kill me!
Ciggy and I rushed over and found a woman being drowned. So like the kind-hearted criminal I am, I sent Ciggy in to save her life.
Let's do this.
And like the good boy he is, he absolutely mauled the guy to death.
Aww.
And the woman too.
I think you should get out of here, ma'am.
Shortly after, Ciggy, Hoss, and I went to bed so we could continue our journey in the morning. I woke up the next day on a mission to take what isn't mine and protect what is. So I ran over to a shady five-finger fillet table hidden behind some buildings and decided to play.
I'll play you.
Unfortunately, I lost, and in doing so, lost $1 of my precious money. So with Ciggy's help, I got it back.
What the fuck y'all got? Damn!
Now it was time to move. There we were, three best friends on the open road just looking for trouble. After covering a little distance, Ciggy caught us a turkey, so I whipped out my campfire in a can and cooked it up for us. You can't harm innocent bystanders on an empty stomach. So with our tummies full, we kept following the road deeper into the dark woods until we eventually came to what looked like a perfectly normal house. But after a little inspection, I found that everyone in the house was sleeping. I was in the process of quietly looting the place when I noticed that we were being rolled up on by a few bounty hunters. So I quickly handled them and hauled ass into the woods like a little... The next morning, I'm rudely awakened by even more bounty hunters. So we rinse and repeat, rob them for all they have, and head off to Emerald Ranch to continue our crime spree. As soon as we got there, Ciggy caught us a California quail, and that gave us enough energy to then rob a man peacefully camping on a hill. I sent Cigarette in to do the dirty work, and he couldn't have made me more proud. In fact, I even drew a sketch so I could one day look back on this special occasion. We headed back down the hill to a farm located in between Emerald Ranch and Valentine. I was looking for valuables in one of the pig pens when I stumbled upon an absolutely horrifying scene. What the f***?
Brother,
Traumatized, I went to inform the owner of the farm, but he pulled his pistol and ordered us to get off his property.
It's all good. Calm down.
I then made the decision to not get off his property and proceeded to take everything he owned. Once I was satisfied, Ciggy and I headed off to Valentine for the next stop on our crime spree. Just after arriving in Valentine, I robbed the doctor's office, but my cover was blown almost immediately, so I panicked and climbed on top of the roof to escape the law. Once I realized that that was a horrible idea, I carefully made my way down to the ground and headed for the hills. While running away like a coward, I realized that Ciggy was desperately trying to fight them off in order to protect me. But just as I was about to turn around and hand deliver some whoop-ass, he thankfully ran into the woods for safety, and we regrouped shortly after. I think it was at this point that I really started to appreciate Cigarette. There was something so fun about running around the map with a sidekick. Not only could he attack on command, but he also protected me when I needed it. And Ciggy's protection would prove to be extremely useful later on in our journey. So after trudging on for a while, I heard the sweet, sweet sound of a train on the tracks above me. Leaving Ciggy behind, I hopped on, quickly taking out the guards before I made my way to the front and negotiated with the train conductor. I went back to get Ciggy, but was ambushed by those damn bounty hunters again and was forced to eliminate them. Thankfully, that made it so I could loot the entire train in peace. What? At least for a little while. Right when I was about to leave, I was ambushed by yet another group of bounty hunters. They were really starting to become a pain in Arthur's sweaty cowboy ass, but I fought them off and set up camp for the night. The next morning, I set my sights on Wallace Station. It felt like a great day to rob and terrorize the local population. We arrived a little while later, and I put Cigarette on lookout duty while I robbed the place. The man at the register didn't put up a fight, so I only knocked him out. But the station clerk threatened to alert the law.
Any more of this and I will get the law.
And we couldn't have that happening.
Boom.
At this point, we were on the home stretch and only had a little more ground to cover before we made it to our destination. But this small section of the map would prove to be a lot more exciting than I expected. Moving on from Wallace Station, I quickly devised a plan to rob unsuspecting travelers using our good friend Ciggy. All I had to do was lasso the victims off their horse, and Ciggy would subdue them for me to rob. But just like every plan I create, it went horribly wrong, and somebody rolled up and caught us red-handed. So while Ciggy took care of the first guy, I lassoed the second one off his horse and ordered Ciggy to keep him at bay. I went over to loot our first victim and turned around to see this. Look at him. He just loves committing crimes. At that point, I did what any honest cowboy would do and cut him free so that Ciggy could have his prize.
That's my boy.
The third victim came along as we were taking a detour to Strawberry, and the fourth came out of nowhere soon after. With a few extremely precise lasso throws, our fourth victim was subdued and left for Cigarette to handle. The purpose of taking the detour to Strawberry was purely for my boy Cigarette. I wanted to let him have a little fun before we moved on to the final leg of our journey. So when we arrived in the evening, I decided to let Ciggy have a shot at the butcher, before making our way down the street to let him play with a cat. Before we left, I made sure to say hi to Micah in jail, and then went to set up camp for our final day of the crime spree. We got up the next day and immediately got to work. I tied up and robbed 2 different groups of travelers just after leaving camp. And of course let Cigarette have his fun as well. We then fought off the daily round of bounty hunters and ran for our lives. At this point, I thought the only thing standing between us and the glorious stilt shack was fields of green grass and butterflies, but somehow I forgot about one of the most dangerous places in the game, the Hanging Dog Ranch. Hanging Dog Ranch is a gang hideout controlled by the O'Driscoll boys. Anyone who gets close gets shot, and that lovely place just so happened to be directly in between us and our destination. We had to fight. There was no other option. With a plan in mind, we snuck up as close as we could to the ranch. This time, Cigarette was going undercover. I sent Ciggy in to sneak by the guards, and once he made it back over to where I was, he took out the guard directly in front of me, which allowed me to sneak up to the entrance, where I had Ciggy take out the 2 guards at the gate while I took care of the rest of the O'Driscoll boys. They were no match for the dynamic duo. I then happily looted every single O'Driscoll body and played with their minigun before I left the ranch behind so that we could get to the true destination. We were just a hop, skip, and a jump away from the stilt shack. We covered the short distance and arrived just as it was starting to get dark. Ladies and gentlemen, we did it. After nearly constant chaos and crime, we made it to the stilt shack. And with that, our journey was complete. Now, there was only one thing left to do. Like all good things, they must come to an end. Ciggy and I had a great run. going on a nearly week-long adventure, committing horribly violent crimes and running from the law. But now, it was time to take him back home. We made the long trip back to Saint Denis, and after spending so much time with him, I just knew our goodbye would be hard. Well, just for me, I guess.